All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here at number 17, and we're still in the section where we are using the rules of exponents to simplify the expression. And we can really approach this one of two ways, and I think I'll go ahead and show both. And then you can decide which way you like best and use that, or like better rather, and go ahead and use that method. So here we have x to the 1/2 over x to the 5/4 times x to the -3. And what we can do is go ahead and start by working with just the denominator. And in the denominator, we can see that we're multiplying like bases. And you will recall that when you multiply like bases, you have to add the exponents. So here we have 5/4. And really, because this is a negative here, we're going to say minus 3/1. And let's see what happens here. Well, we know that when we add and subtract fractions, we need a common denominator. And because we have a 4 and a 1, the common denominator is going to be 4. So we don't have to do anything to the first fraction, but we do have to do something to our second fraction here. So let's go ahead and multiply our denominator by 4. And we know whatever we do to the bottom, we have to now do to the top. So what we can say is that we really have now 5/4 minus 12/4. And that's going to give us -7/4. So now we have x to the 1/2 in our numerator over x to the -7/4 in the denominator. Well, we know that we can't have negative exponents, so let's go ahead and take our x to the -7/4, move it up to the numerator, and what that's going to do is give us now x to the 1/2 times x to the now positive 7/4, right? By virtue of moving the x to the -7/4 up to our numerator, it changes the sign of that power. Well, now we have a situation just like we had in the original denominator, right? Where we're multiplying like bases again. So since we're multiplying like bases, we know what we have to do to those exponents. We have to add them. So here we have 1/2 now plus 7/4. And again, we want to get ourselves a common denominator, which in this case is going to be 4. So we'll multiply by 2, multiply by 2. And so really what we end up with here is 2/2 plus, 2/4, right? 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 7/4, which is going to give us 9/4. And so what we end up with as a final answer is x to the 9/4. So that's the first way you can approach doing this, where you first deal with your denominator, go from two separate terms here, combine them into one, move the negative exponent up to the numerator, and then again you're multiplying like bases, and then you arrive at your final answer. Or what you can do is right away, you can go ahead and take this negative exponent, you can move it up to the numerator, and so what you end up with now is, let me go ahead and we'll section that off a little bit. So if we moved that -3 up, what we end up with is x to the 1/2 times now x to the +3 over x to the 5/2. And now our numerator, we're multiplying like bases, so we're going to have to add these exponents. So what we have here is 1/2 plus 3/1. Again, we need a common denominator, which is going to be 2. So we end up with now 1/2 plus 6/2, which is going to give us now 7/2. So here we end up with x to the 7/2 over x to the now 5/4. Well, now we have a situation where we are going to ask ourselves, are we top heavy or bottom heavy? And this one might be a little more difficult to figure out with rational exponents, whether or not the rational exponent in the top is bigger or the rational exponent in the bottom is bigger. So you can do one of two things. You can either put this into your calculator and you're going to get some decimal, or you can try to figure it out here. So let's see, 7/2 is going to end up being, well, 2 goes into 7 3 times with 1 left over. So we end up with 3.5. And now 5/4, Well, 4 goes into 5 once with 1 left over, and so 5 over 4 is the same as 1/4. So 7/2 is clearly larger than 5/4. So what we're going to end up doing is subtracting 5/4 from 7/2. So let's go ahead and do that, and that is going to give us our new final denominator, exponent rather. So 7/2 minus 5/4. Well, again, here we are again, subtracting fractions. We need a common denominator. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have. And that's not what we're going to do. Our common denominator is going to be 4, so we're going to multiply by 2, rather. So what we end up really is, well, 2 times 7 is 14 over 4 minus 5 over 4, which gives us 9 over 4. And so when we do our top heavy, bottom heavy, we're top heavy by how many? Well, we're top heavy by 9/4. And so 9/4 is our new exponent. And you can see that no matter which way you do it, you end up at the same answer. This way is probably a little more complicated if you're not comfortable with doing top heavy, bottom heavy with rational exponents. This way I think was probably a little more straightforward, but either way you can see we arrive at the same answer. So number 17, final answer is x to the 9/4.